Look okay. All right. Well, I
This meeting is being recorded.
thought we'd take a few minutes today to just talk about, loved ones' acceptance of illness and treatment since they're going through a journey alongside the participant. So we're going to talk a little bit about considerations that, we can think about as providers when a loved one is struggling to accept a diagnosis or to accept treatment, and then what we can do to be supportive of these loved ones. So I don't think it'd be any surprise that we hear from participants, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm not sick, I don't need help. And we've all heard that time and time again, I think, and that's not surprising given that 50 to 60% of individuals living with schizophrenia specifically, and about 40% of individuals with bipolar disorder actually have what's called anosognosia, which is an unawareness of illness, really like a blind spot to the illness. And oftentimes we assume it's related to denial or defensiveness when it's actually to do with their brain. And so, when we think about that, that's not so uncommon. But what about when loved ones, when it's just not the individual that's struggling to have sort of an acceptance or awareness of illness, and it's more people that are around them that are struggling with the participant's experience or accepting treatment? So loved ones, you may see them offer different explanations. Anything other than schizophrenia is the reason why their loved one is experiencing symptoms, or going through what the family members are observing. They offer explanations as to why it could not be schizophrenia. Any reasons that it could not be schizophrenia, and this isn't always a bad thing, right? It's never schizophrenia until it's nothing else. And so making sure to talk with loved ones and rule out any of the possibilities is a really important part of the process. But it's important, at some point when we realize the diagnosis, if family is still struggling, what do we do at that point? So sometimes families and loved ones will present to the team as angry or frustrated or disinterested or unengaged. And, we may think it's because they lack commitment to the participant or to the process. They're just too busy, that they don't see the benefit of treatment, when really it may actually be due to their own experiences and their own emotional journey about what their loved one, the participant, is going through. And so we just have to be mindful and be aware about their level of readiness to engage with the team, to engage with the loved one, and in what ways and to what degree. How ready are they for information or psychoeducation? How much information are we sharing? What's the timing of this information? What is it that we're sharing at various points in time? Really, really important things to consider. And also our use of labels and jargon, those things come so naturally to us. Even words like symptoms or triggers or, things that seem sort of commonplace in our language can be something that's very distressing to loved ones. So just being mindful about the language that we use. So loved ones' difficulty with acceptance of a diagnosis or treatment can really lead to difficulties with treatment adherence for their participant, because family members and loved ones do have an influence over that, especially when the participant resides with loved ones. It can lead to difficulties with supporting the treatment plan if they don't fully understand or have full buy-in or level of readiness at this point. There can be discord with the loved ones and the participant, the loved ones and the treatment team, the loved one and other family members who maybe have differing opinions about what is happening with the participant. There's also a lot of increased stress and frustration and fear and grief for loved ones who are in this phase of not quite being ready to accept what's going on. So something for us to consider as providers is, taking a step back, really hearing their concerns without any kind of judgment, without trying to push an agenda. We need you to do this. You need to make sure they come to appointments. You need to make sure they're taking their medications, but really take a step back and with genuine curiosity and trying to gather information, trying to understand their perspective or where their hesitations and anxieties come from. So what's the history of these concerns? Have they had prior experience? Maybe they had another family member who had a negative experience with a mental health diagnosis or with the mental health system. What's perpetuating their anxieties? What's keeping it alive? What then allowing it to grow and be so powerful for them? Is that in part maybe the media? My son couldn't have schizophrenia because they say that a lot of kids take guns to school. My son would never do that, so he can't have that diagnosis. I've heard that from teams. What evidence do they have to support the concerns, or evidence that they feel really makes this concern likely to be true? What is their biggest fear? You know, and really digging into this a bit with loved ones, you know, what does this label mean to them? If we say an individual has schizophrenia, what does that mean for the individual's future? Does that mean, you know, no opportunity for success? You know, what is it that they're fearing if they were to accept this diagnosis? And medications come up all the time, especially with family members. A lot of times loved ones will think that's the only answer, you know, it's the magic bullet. And then for other families, it's the opposite side of the continuum. Medication's very scary, it's dangerous, there's too many side effects, this is a non-option. And so how do we get them to fall into more of a sweet spot somewhere along that continuum? So it's really critical we understand loved ones' perspectives and experiences, past and present, to help so that we can help and be appropriately supportive of their loved one that is participating in FIRST. Some other things that we can do that I think are very important are validating and normalizing these fears about a diagnosis, about treatment. You know, for example, all medications have risks, but we need to have, you know, educated discussions, open discussions with your team's prescriber, you know, about what are the risks and do those risks outweigh potential benefits. And then when it's appropriate, once you've really established rapport and you've developed trust with these loved ones, discussing both the validity of concerns, because there's always validity to all of these concerns, and misinformation that's found somewhere along their concern, and then asking them for permission to share your perspective or somebody from your team that's participating in these discussions, but to get feedback. You know, if we provide them with some new information, what are their thoughts about that? You know, since it goes against what their belief system is about whatever the concern may be. We also want to help loved ones understand that not everything, not every emotional reaction, every behavior is due to the illness, right? And I think this is probably one of the kindest things we can offer to loved ones, is just to say, your teenager's being a teenager. He's being mouthy. She's, you know, not wanting to get out of bed. You know, all those common developmentally normative things that we see sometimes get lost when everything is considered that it's due to the illness. And so that can be something that is such a sigh of relief, is just, oh, okay, they're just acting their age, or they're just being human, more importantly. You know, we all have moments where we're emotionally reactive, or we shout, or we cry. And helping families to understand that, you know, if somebody has an emotional reaction or response to you as a family member, and your immediate response is to say, well, did you take your meds today? How that can really strip the individual of their humanness, their humanity, because it's a part of the normative human experience to have all of these different emotions. And so it helps it facilitates that mindset of I'm nothing but my illness, which is the exact opposite of what families are intending, but it comes from a fear-based place. So working with them to normalize that, you know, not everything is due to the illness or a side effect of the medication, that sometimes it's just about developmental or being part of the human race, right? We also, as providers, can allow families some space, you know, allow them to grieve, allow them some time to be uncertain, to be anxious. You know, this may have felt like very sudden to them. You know, they might have been a sudden shift from a previously high achieving participant, and now, you know, they've had 2 hospitalizations and they're feeling like all is lost. Or it could have been something that's developed slowly over time, and this has led to feelings of exhaustion and burnout, and they're feeling like they're out of options. And so these are, you know, your opportunities to sit with them, normalize again some of these experiences, and then talk with them about there is hope. Recovery is the expectation. Share stories of hope and recovery with them. Let them know that they now have a team of people alongside them that are going to walk with them through this journey. That's a very, very important piece, but sometimes it's just allowing them the space to experience these feelings. If there's tension, with a certain aspect or a certain, concerning part of treatment, but, oftentimes, especially with medications, we see this come up. Maybe take a step back if it's safe and appropriate. For those of us who are non-prescribers, allow your space to be the place for talking about, goals of the participant and family, how to live happy, healthy, fulfilling lives, providing practical information, normalizing stressors, those things like that, where you take, medication discussions off the table and allow the prescribers to handle that. Because one of our fears and one of our worries is always, disengagement of the participant, but that can happen with loved ones as well. And so if there is a time when there's a lot of tension, a lot of stress, allow, in order to keep engagement and to keep building that rapport and trust with the family, allow them the space with somebody on your team where they can talk about these more practical things that are impacting their day-to-day lives. And sometimes it can be helpful, especially thinking about timing, to leave labels and things of that nature at the door for a set period of time. So, in this space, we're not going to discuss medication for the next 3 appointments. Do you agree to that? Doesn't mean that we're undermining the importance of medication. It's just you have a space for that with the psychiatrist. And it seems like it's creating tension with us, in this space. So let's take a step back. Other things that providers can do that can sometimes be helpful are behavioral experiments. This goes along with helping to understand that not everything is due to the illness, and it's not all negatives that the person is going through. It's very easy when you come in for an appointment to remember how bad things are, or these are all the things that are going wrong, or these are the things that aren't getting better. And so, if we have everybody that's participating, as long as the participant is okay with it, but, loved ones, team members that are tracking what's going on in the person's life for a set period of time, it can really be eye-opening that, yes, it seems like there are these symptoms that are occurring, or there are these unwanted behaviors. But the important part that we often don't track are, what are the positives? What progress are we making? And so being able to identify, some of those positive goals as well. And shared decision making and problem solving. If the concern, for example, just because it's a common one, is taking medications, a decision guide or a decision aid like the Ottawa Guide, or others, these are just a couple that are really helpful. But working through one of these sort of pro-con lists, the pros and cons of making decision A and the pros and cons of making decision B, how important are these, weighing the options, really thinking through, understanding one another's perspectives, both the participant and the loved ones, can be a really empowering experience for the entire family system or family unit. And so this is something that, is we can do to help loved ones in their journey towards acceptance, and openness to different kinds of treatment. And really the last thing that is sort of a CBT related strategy. So if you have a family who has a lot of concerns about engaging in treatment, and for example, medications is their biggest concern, their biggest fear. What are their concerns about taking, we're going to use medications? It could be fatal. It could have terrible side effects. It could, whatever it might be. Have them list all of those things, those concerns, and how anxious each of them makes them, and how likely they think it would be the outcome. So how likely would it that taking this medication would result in a fatality? How likely is it that it would have undesirable side effects, whatever it might be? And then discuss the evidence for and against each concern, utilizing other members of your team, in this case, prescribers from your team to really flesh out. Let's have conversations about these concerns and break down what the research says, validating those concerns. And then after they have all of this evidence that they've reviewed with the team, how likely now do they believe each would be the outcome? And usually what you'll see is with some evidence that usually the anxiety and that conviction that this really bad, scary thing is going to be the outcome has come down. And that will continue to decrease over time with continued discussions. And so that at that point, when you've re-rated the anxiety levels and talking about benefits outweighing the risks, the most important thing that you can do is come up with a detailed plan that you can implement in a really safe, structured way. So you're sort of a safety net for everyone involved. And so if the concern is medication and their anxiety level has come down a bit, and so they're more open to trying out medication, What do they do if they have a concern about a side effect and it's the weekend? You know, who do they call? What are things that they should be looking for? How long will it take to see if these medications are making a difference? You know, really hash out in great detail a plan. And this can sometimes really be helpful for families to feel more open to giving new treatment modalities, medication or otherwise, a try. So overall, you know, just be cognizant of the language we're using. Remember that loved ones who are not engaging with us, it's not always because they're not committing to the participant or the process, or they lack interest or availability. Sometimes it's truly because of their own anxieties or experiences. And this is why it's so important for us as providers and team members to really get to know the loved ones and their experience, because they do have a lot of influence over treatment and outcomes and the participant, especially when they reside together, but you know, not limited to that. And so it can be work to engage loved ones, but it's such a critical part of the work that we do as a team. And so we want to be able to provide them with support and education and skills, but always being mindful of our timing and their level of readiness. So on our last slides, just some recommended resources for you and our references. So thank you for your time today. Appreciate you all.